Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. A few things to get through. Obviously, some of you would have seen that I put some goal reactions to the Euro 20s on my YouTube account. There will be some people that say that maybe I'm slightly hypocritical. Well, I guess that's a true claim in the sense that I actually talked about the Euros, isn't it? How funny it is the pretense of us supporting different teams based on different places where we were born, even though we're all human beings, and the names we're given are all illusionary in that sense. They're part of a pretend, and it reminds me of when you're at school and your friends, you have to form two football teams, and one of you plays one side, one of you plays the other, and then you play football, and you're pretending to be different teams. And we've forgotten that in real life we're doing exactly the same thing. It is pretending. We're pretending to be English, we're pretending to be Brazilian, we're pretending to be Portuguese. We're all human beings, and it's just someone in the past gave these bits of land that are all of ours names just so we could be categorised, because humans love to put things in boxes. And so yeah, it's true that I was watching Euros and I did get sucked into my programming of a national identity being part of me. It's very difficult to unpick these things. That's the problem. We all have been schooled, we've all been programmed in the system that we live within, and getting out of it is very, very difficult, because you keep getting sucked in by these little things, and these little things, they seem like they're not much, but they are, because they're the ones that keep you reinvigorated into the system, keep you wanting to have the system. And of course the system does have its benefits as well. Obviously it does. It gives us stability, and which is why a lot of people find it difficult to think of anything outside the system, as if we haven't lived different systems throughout human history. But yeah, so I just wanted to answer that. Obviously there's been talk about the racism that was at the English team with I think Sterling previously, and obviously during the penalties, Saka, Santos and Rashford, the mural of Rashford's that was defaced. I don't need to say anything about that. It's obviously, it's a disgusting act, whoever's doing this, and the very fact of the matter, how stupid it is, the idea of that penalties are missed by any colour, and colour is just a division. This is why I don't like it when they ask me what my children are. Are they mixed? Are they white African, black African? Whatever name they want to put down. I refuse to do it, because I'm not going to be racist by naming you the colour of my child. They're human beings, and the problem is, until we get rid of these categorizations, these divisions when it comes to land, these divisions when it comes to the colour of someone's skin defining them, until we get rid of all these things, we're going to have these groups, and then they're going to just fight with each other and have these negative views, because it doesn't look like human beings can evolve past that. So I was watching Sky News, and they were asking about this issue, and they were talking about, there shouldn't be racism in sport, shouldn't be racism in football, but they stopped short of, there shouldn't be racism in the world. I don't know why they didn't say that part, but luckily later on they interviewed John Barnes, and I think he put it best when he explained it. So I'm going to play that to you now, because I think these days TV companies, social news companies, they're having a lot more difficulty in controlling the narrative. In the past they can control it, by saying things at the end, or picking who they're going to talk to because they know what they're going to say. But these days people are a lot more, I'll say woke, I suppose is the answer, and they will actually say their true feelings rather than hide in what the media wants you to say, because we all have that, that in us, that we know what we should say. But now there's a lot more people that are using their passion, using their truth, and is getting out. And so this, I think, is an example of that. I'm going to play it for you.
All you can ask is for them to keep doing what they're doing, and we keep our fingers crossed. And John, it's such a shame that I have to ask you this question this morning, as if the England team aren't hurting enough. But yet again, racism rears its ugly head. And those three young players that missed the penalty spot kicks in particular targeted online. I mean, you've literally written a book on this subject, The Uncomfortable Truth About Racism. What can you say in a situation like this? Because time and time again, it keeps happening to black players.
Football can do nothing to solve the ills of the world when it comes to racism, sexism, homophobia. And why do we assume that it can? Football cannot bring people together from a social aspect. It brings people together in wanting us to win the World Cup or to win the Euros. Now, if we're saying that football has brought people together from a racial point of view or sexist or homophobic point of view, what we're actually saying is that if they score the goal and score the penalties, we'll support them. And if they don't, they'll get racist abuse. That is not the solution. So we have to stop feeling that football can solve this problem. Society has to solve this problem. Implicit, unconscious bias that we all have towards black people, towards women, towards Muslims, will continue regardless of whether England wins the World Cup or not. So we can't be so naive as to feel that we're coming together in a harmonious fashion socially, from a racial, sexist or homophobic point of view, because Marcus Rashford has scored a penalty. So in other words, if he misses the penalty, he's going to get racist abuse, but if he scores the penalty, the ills of the world are solved. That is too naive for us to think that. It's a much bigger problem, with a societal problem, because before we're talking about these racist football fans, what industry, what environment do they belong to? Are they doctors, lawyers, bankers, milkmen, postmen? So why don't we say that those industries and those environments and those institutions are racially biased? But no, we throw it at the floor of football and everyone else absolves themselves of responsibility.
John, it's a strong note to end on, and like I said, it's such a shame that we have to talk about it today, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning after quite a late night for all.
There you go. So she couldn't sort of cover that one up. Usually they try to say things to negate whatever's just been said by whatever narrative they want to get across, but there's nothing you can say after that. So the next few things are to do with the things I've talked about a lot on Pursuit of Truth, medical things to do with Primodos, to do with the vaginal mesh, and just wanted to show you how, well, when people say, like with, say, COVID vaccination, they say that, oh, it's untested and you know, you're lab rats, and, you know, people will say, no, they would never do something like that. These pharmaceutical companies, the NHS, they tend to forget that everything is run by humans, and humans can do whatever they want to do, and humans lie and tell the truth and profit from money and have all sorts of, you know, humans are serial killers. You know, just because they are under this guise of a corporation, it doesn't mean that suddenly they stop being human. They still have these failings. But, you know, people will say, no, I don't know why people have this idea that pharmaceutical companies are doing things for the good of people. Yes, partly they are, but most of the reason they're doing it is for money. You know, if the government said to them, we're going to, you know, stop paying you money for these things and you have to do it for free, I wonder how many would continue doing that, or they'd move on to something else. Think about that one. So, yeah, so this is showing how, you know, the difficulties of these things that have been proven that they had caused these problems, and yet they make recommendations and the government decides, oh, I'm only going to follow a few of them. And the struggle, you know, you think of COVID now, these vaccinations, you know, people are saying things about them, and, you know, people are still injecting themselves with these, including me, and they will, you know, that we may find in 30 years' time that they were right, that there was some problem with these vaccinations that, you know, that we don't see down the line, health risk and etc., that we signed away, giving our consent to, and we'll be fighting the same way. And the thing is people think that it's just an instant thing, you know. The thing is with everything, especially with British jurisprudence and all that kind of stuff, it takes forever for anyone to decide things, months, years, decades, and then they just ignore it, or they just brush under the carpet. So here's some examples of that. Just before, you know, if those people who think, oh no, for NHS or pharmaceuticals or doctors or etc., you know, they would never do anything to hurt us. Well, here's your proof of that they do. Sometimes. First one first.
Findings of the official inquiry into the impact of controversial pregnancy drug Prividos. 1 year on, Baroness Cumberledge, who chaired that inquiry, told our home editor Jason Farrell that the response has been glacial. Jason has also been hearing from more women whose lives have been changed forever.
First of all, just say your full name for me, Linda.
Linda Phillips.
And your daughter's name?
My daughter wasn't actually christened, but we would have called her Laura.
My name is Anne-Marie Darracott.
And what was the name of your child, did you?
She was going to be called Catherine.
My daughter was stillborn in 1976 due to Prividos. She was born with the top of her brain missing and the top of her skull missing. Never saw her, don't know what they did with her, don't know where she's buried.
I never saw the baby. I didn't know what was wrong with the baby, and she was taken away.
Anne and Linda gave birth at a time when deformed, stillborn babies were sometimes whisked away from their mothers with few questions asked. There's lots of different children buried at 416.
There's ours.
Using public library records, Anne recently located her child's unmarked grave. Linda is still looking.
It would be nice to have somewhere where I can go. Where I can put flowers, where I can put a teddy bear. Right now, there's nowhere.
Both women believe their children were born with birth defects because of a drug they took while pregnant called Prividos. The manufacturer, Shearing, now owned by Bayer, denies this. But a year ago, an independent committee led by Baroness Cumberledge said Prividos and other drugs caused avoidable harm, and the government apologised for regulatory failings. The committee made 9 recommendations, including that the government offer financial redress to victims of Prividos, vaginal mesh, and the epilepsy drug valproate, because there were clear failures to properly regulate the risks. But a year on, the redress hasn't happened.
I think that some of the action has been glacial. It has taken so long to achieve things. And these people have been waiting for decades. We've seen some progress on the Patient Safety Commissioner. We've now got it in law, which is really good. But what we are so needing is some redress for those that have suffered.
The drug valproate has been shown to cause a range of birth defects, but unlike Prividos, is still used today as an effective epilepsy drug.
Collectively, they have autism, ADHD, VCD, incontinence, hypermobility, a lot of learning problems that they need extra help with.
Leanne and Warren Matthews have 3 children with severe problems caused by valproate. Medics had concerns about the drug decades ago, but campaigners say women using valproate continue to get pregnant unaware of the risks. Only in the last week did the Matthews receive a letter from the NHS warning about the drug.
It's known for so long. Why has it taken this long for the letter to come out?
I mean, it just seems as if they're doing bare minimal every single step of the way. Government's damaged our children and they're just going whatever speed they want to. That's how it seems.
Yeah,
there's no urgency.
That's how you feel the government's done this to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no one else. They was the one that okayed that medication. They knew of the dangers. They knew of the dangers 48 years ago and they did nothing.
Some lessons have been learned since Linda and Anne were pregnant. But not quickly enough for Warren and Leanne's family. And while the government says it's working on implementing 5 of the recommendations from last year's report, it's still considering others. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Right, so there you go. You can see how long it takes. And that's why a lot of people don't get involved with these things. Because how long it takes, you know, and all the fighting you have to do and all the proving you have to do is another part of it.
Let's return to the story that we led with at the top of the hour. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, confirming...
Well, this one has still got to come.
It's the responsibility from government and from the law onto employers to make their own decisions. The main areas that are going to be contentious here: mask wearing, no longer required by law, the advice says. However, government expects and recommends people to continue to wear face coverings in crowded spaces. I'll keep going if you can hear me.
Right, okay, next one. Oh, it's the same one.
Look at the weather now.
Where is it? Somewhere here. So this one is a similar kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's there.
Now, there have been renewed calls for the government to respond to concerns about pelvic mesh. It was highlighted in a major review that was published a year ago. The mesh has been linked to life-changing complications in women, including chronic pain and infections. But now the government has indicated that it will not implement some of the key recommendations that were set out in that review, to the fury of campaigners. Sky's Charlotte Lomas reports.
Lainey Birch used to live her life to the full.
Before the mesh, I was a bubbly person, just so happy. Now, I'm just a depressive who stays at home.
Now she's in so much pain she can barely walk, relying on a cocktail of medication. 4 years ago, she had a procedure to help cure her mild incontinence. She had a plastic mesh implant fitted like this one, designed to support her pelvic floor muscles like a sling. But the mesh eroded and sliced into her bladder, causing chronic pain.
At the worst point, the first, when my all inflammation started, that was when I was really, really down. Plus the pain, not being able to walk, not always being able to get to the toilet on time. It was horrendous. And I didn't want to be here. And I do now. And it upsets me because that's how I went. I don't want to leave my kids.
In the 6 years that I've been investigating mesh, one of the biggest issues has been a lack of evidence showing the risks of the procedure. Complications weren't recorded, or women have simply been ignored. That's why a scathing review led by Baroness Cumberledge last year called for an audit to take place to go back and question women who've had the procedure. But that still hasn't happened. Campaigners say such an audit is vital to show the true scale of the problem.
You're actually looking at real women and real outcomes. So if you took a sample of women from 2010, which is what Baroness Cumberledge has called for in her report, if you went back to every single woman that's had a mesh and asked her how she's doing now, 11 years later, that is real world evidence. And we need that because all of these women are missing so far from the data. So many women are going under the radar. There's a massive black hole of women suffering.
An audit was one of several recommendations put forward by an independent committee led by Baroness Cumberledge. It said mesh and the drugs Primidos and sodium valproate caused avoidable harm to women. A year on, the debate continued in Parliament on Thursday with a refusal from the government to consider all the recommendations.
I'll be honest, we are not going to accept the redress agency as recommendation 3.
Disappointing news for those calling for change.
At the moment, the pressure is on the women. These are women that have been harmed, women that have been made disabled. The pressure is on them, the financial and emotional cost of having to go to court to seek the justice that they need. And we need a fairer system.
The government says it's working to implement 5 of the report's 9 recommendations. Too late for Lainey, who says her life has been destroyed by a quick fix procedure she wishes she never had. Charlotte Lomas, Sky News.
Well, in the last hour, Baroness Cumberledge, who led that critical review a year ago into how the health service has treated female patients, told me that action was needed, not words.
We were delighted that an apology was made, and a very fulsome apology. But an apology only goes so far. It should result in action. And we've been disappointed that in a whole year, our 9 recommendations have not been implemented. We can't put right some of the damage that's been done. We can't do that. But we can try and make their lives more bearable.
Now for a quick look at the week.
There you go. That's that story. So you can see. I mean, I know you could accuse me of cherry picking where things go wrong, and I mean, I'm not trying to say that there aren't benefits to drugs and pharmaceutical companies and NHS and etc. Yeah, obviously there is. What I'm trying to show you is that when people talk about certain things and they say, when they say there's no possibility that, that they would be inventing a disease or a drug to give you because they want to do this, that, the other, or make money, and you think, oh no, they're regulated and all this and other. That's what I'm trying to show, is that there are places where this fails, so that gives the opportunity for these things to take place. And I mean, why are these things failing? It's probably because of money, because they didn't want to admit that they must have known when they did their research that there was these problems, but yet they didn't want to lose money because they wanted to provide the service. Alright, so now we're going to move on to this next one, which is to do with with more recent, to do with the IRA, well, not IRA specifically, the troubles in Ireland and the government wanting to end, like criminal proceedings for people who've committed crimes during the Ireland troubles of the 70s and 80s or 60s, I don't know if it goes that far back. And this lady that talks, it was quite interesting how she because a lot of people talk about infiltration when they talk about movements, like Black Lives Matter. People will talk about infiltration, that people will infiltrate in there and then they will cause trouble on purpose to make Black Lives Matter look bad, and people sort of saying, oh no, there's no such thing as that. We know that in other movements, like Black Panthers and etc., there was FBI agents that were pretending to be one of them to get information or to make things happen certain ways. And so here there's this lady who's claiming that the British government was involved, or could have been involved, in, I assume she's talking about the IRA and whoever the Northern Ireland side would have been, and may have been complicit in their murders or bombings. I'm not sure which one she's talking about. But it shows that this infiltration thing is going on. I'm sure it's happening in the Flat Earth movement or woke movements or truthers and etc. So here this it was quite explosive, and I'm surprised they broadcast all of it, to be honest. They didn't even give a disclaimer at the end. Maybe they know more than they're saying.
Limitations that will apply equally to all troubles-related incidents. He announced that in the House of Commons just under an hour ago. Joining me now to react to this, Julie Hamilton. Her sister Maxine was killed in the 1974 Birmingham pub bombings, and Julie was listening to what was said in the House of Commons. Julie, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sarah Jane.
A very emotional afternoon for you, I can imagine, after hearing what the Northern Ireland Secretary had to say. What's your reaction to this planned statute of limitations?
Well, like I would imagine hundreds, if not thousands of other families were incandescent with rage, because what this proposal of legislation is going to be allowing will be, in essence, giving murderers a license to kill. Because as long as any future terrorist organisation, and trust me, there'll be some waiting in the wings, and this must be music to their ears, as long as they come with a political stance of, we are fighting for our political freedoms, or whatever, they can kill thousands and thousands of people in any of our cities without any fear of retribution, of prosecution, or any criminal prosecutions whatsoever. What kind of a society are we planning for our future generations? I chose not to have children. I'm not strong enough to have children. Losing Maxine had such a massive effect on me that the thought of having a child and then potentially losing that child, I am not strong enough to cope. I don't know how our mother has coped, and I don't know how all the other parents have coped. This legislation is basically writing off any history that our loved ones ever existed. And that's what it's all about. This is for the government and their predecessors to bury their dirty, toxic pasts, and for them to never, ever see the light of day. The rhetoric that Brandon Lewis was coming out with is obscene and abhorrent to our ears. How is it possible that a government in a country that claims to have a judicial system that's the envy of the world is considering implementing legislation that will allow mass murderers to have their liberty? Can you imagine if the Americans gave amnesty to the Boston bomber? The public anger that was seen last January 2020 in Washington would be an afternoon tea party in comparison, and yet they expect us to sit back and take this lying down. What people need to understand about the Troubles is that the British state had infiltrated both the IRA and the loyalist side, so much so that it could be argued that the British state are also complicit in many of the murders. And the sole purpose of this legislation, there's no ifs and no buts. Please do not be blinded by all the rhetoric and so-called reconciliation. How can there possibly be reconciliation?
Julia, it's so hard. I know how upset you are. This will drag up all of those painful memories about Maxine, and you live with this every day. And today is the height of that emotion. What the government is saying, what they've essentially said, is that some families will never get justice. Instead, the focus is going to be on information recovery for families of those killed. What Brandon Lewis said was that the current system isn't working. He said this is the best and only solution for victims and their families. That, he said, is the painful reality. Do you think there is another way? Because Brandon Lewis pointed out when his opposite number on the Labour benches said everything she had to say, echoing what you're saying, he came back and said Labour have not offered another solution. The process of getting justice in these historical cases is so complex, the government feel that this is the best solution, that victims may not get justice now because of the statute of limitations, but people may be more forthcoming with answers. I think I know the answer to this, but for many families, they may not get justice. Will they be satisfied with finding out more and getting answers without it ending in prosecution?
No. No, and this rubbish talking about reconciliation and truth. Even if that was to come to pass, who's to say that the person talking will actually be telling the truth? Because most of them wouldn't know how to spell the word, let alone speak it. And as far as there's no evidence there, and that it's just too late to bring about prosecutions, that is another load of utter rubbish. The evidence is there, it's just that it's been hidden, and the purpose and the priority of this government and past successive governments is to keep their collusion with both sides of the IRA and the loyalists, is to keep their dirty, toxic secrets well and truly buried.
Julie, will you fight this? Will you fight this?
For us to Absolutely, of course we will fight it.
Because the Labour benches were saying that legally...
Listen, Sarah Jane, today...
No, please carry on.
Sarah Jane, today, that they have buried a young lad who was stabbed to death down the road from where I live, Dijon. God bless him, may he rest in peace. Can you imagine if Dijon's mother and brother and family were to sit back and listen to the similar rhetoric that we've just had to sit and listen to by Brendan Lewis and by Boris Johnson jumping to his defence after Keir Starmer, thank you very much, highlighted our campaign and other people's, sitting back and taking it and saying, well, there's not enough evidence there and it's very complex. Of course it's complex, of course it's challenging. And you know why it's complex and challenging? Because they've got too much to hide, because the predecessors of past governments have got our loved ones' blood on their hands, and they want to do everything that is in their power to keep their collusion well and truly buried. And we will not sit back and allow our loved ones to be forgotten about. And the other issue is that, of course, it's complex, and the reason why it's complex is because all governments refuse to have any dialogue with the victims of these terrorist attacks. We have never, ever been acknowledged by any government, irrelevant to what political party. Today has been the most significant day for the Birmingham pub bombing families, where Keir Starmer referred to me by name, which we were very grateful for. Louise Haig has referred to us and other families in Northern Ireland. But there are so many other families, the Omar in Enniskillen, Ballymurphy, the London Wharf bombings, the
representing all those families
just
today.
So many other
You're representing
Sunday.
all those families
all
today.
All of these families.
And you're doing a sterling job at representing those families and their feelings today. You mentioned the fact that Sir Keir Starmer brought you up in the House of Commons today. I just want to read you the Prime Minister's statement, because Sir Keir Starmer said, what does the Prime Minister have to say to Julie, because she is listening, and other victims like her? The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, said, I think the whole House will acknowledge the suffering of victims like Julie and their families, and of course nothing I can say or do now will mitigate her loss. But it is also true that the people of Northern Ireland must, if we possibly can allow them to, must move forward.
It is impossible, it is absolutely impossible to move forward until truth, justice and accountability is seen to be done. The purpose of this legislation is to cover up to the true scale of the exposure of the British state in the past, and that is what this is all about. It's a smoke screen, and until they go into dialogue with the victims on both sides of the troubles, only then can there be some answers. But the problem is, we're not only with the Conservatives, but Labour too, and I've told the Labour MPs that have taken the time to speak to us the same thing. Until they listen to us and all the others, only then can there be a path towards peace and prosperity and some kind of calmness, not just in Northern Ireland, but also within the mainland of England too, where many families have suffered the loss of their loved ones. There are just too many suffering, and we cannot allow ourselves, even for our future generations. How can we possibly wake up tomorrow morning or in months to come, having had this legislation being implemented, knowing that our children and our children's children could be walking down the street one day, be blown up, and then in years to come, the very same terrorists who murdered them walk away scot-free because the British government put into legislation in 2021 that you can kill whoever you like, wherever you like on British soil, because it was for a political stance. Who on earth, in what country, in the Western society, would allow that to go through?
Julie, it's been good to talk to you this afternoon. Thank you very much for taking the time. It is an extremely difficult day for you, and as you referenced, other victims' families as well. You're questioning the morality of that announcement in the House of Commons today. The legality of what's been announced today will be questioned as well. Judy Hambleton, remembering her sister Maxine, thank you very much
for speaking to us here on
Thank
Sky
you.
News. We'll have much more reaction to events in the House of Commons concerning Northern Ireland. And
right, so luckily she tried her best to sort of rein her in, but it was impossible because of the passion and maybe the truth she was speaking. But it just goes to show you that, I mean, these are I suppose the government would say allegations, and you know, I can't verify any of the things on either of the sides, but it's not the first time we've heard governments being infiltrating into movements. So, but it was just there to show you that, I mean, I suppose another example, all of these things, of the system failing. And yeah, okay, some people say I'm cherry picking, there's lots of examples. I could show maybe more examples of the system succeeding. Yeah, because it does. People, you know, especially in the Western world, live a fairly nice life, you know, even if it is repetitive and in slavery by work. But yet they live, say, a healthy life, and if they have a problem, then go to a hospital and have surgery. Yes, there are benefits to these things. But the fact is that there's too much suffering in the system, and the failings, you know, keep on coming out, and there's no real, you know, it's like blood pouring from a wound. No one's wanting to think of a different way of approaching it. And until that, we're going to keep having these failings until it affects you personally. You won't see it as a failing until then, and then you'll realise, yes, the system doesn't work. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.